Anytime you notice you're in a great place in your mind, you notice that and you think, I'm going to stack this. I'm going to add this to my power of my positive anchors. What you do is feel that state, feel that joy, that happiness, whatever, and say,
we're going to say, awesome. Hey everyone, in this video, we want to talk to you about the principle of anchoring, or the concept or the tool anchoring in NLP.
Anchoring is really awesome. It's one of those things that when you understand it, you'll start to see it happening all the time. Now, we're not talking about these massive steel anchors you can use to hold a ship in place.
Although that is an anchor.
Oh, that is an anchor.
For the word anchor.
But it's not the right kind. What we're talking about is a stimulus, a trigger that is attached to a specific state or emotion. When the trigger is fired, the emotion results immediately, or the state results immediately.
Okay, so there are all kinds of these that exist in nature. For example, you could be driving your car down the highway and you see the flashing lights in your rearview mirror. You know that means you're about to be pulled over, or maybe if you hear a siren, you know it's an emergency. These anchors already exist. Let's talk about how
that'll
they
fire
relate.
you into a bad state instantly, like, cops, especially if you've been committing crimes recently. But another one is an obvious one, Chris, and it's the anchor of Christmas. To me, Christmas is a huge deal. It's my wife's birthday.
Sure.
As soon as here in Canada, we smell the pine boughs, put up the Christmas tree, and I start to hear Christmas music, bang, I feel Christmas.
Or you hear those
it's
jingle,
the jingle bells, the Christmas songs. It fires the state that we call Christmas.
Right.
Now, the thing is, you don't have to believe in anchors.
And that's a really good point, that because we now know that these happen automatically, they're not something you need to believe in. You don't have to believe in gravity to understand that if you jump out of a building, you're going to fall to the ground, right? So it's not something you need to believe in. They also can be done either consciously or unconsciously. We just described unconscious anchors.
We did.
Right?
Like, I didn't set up that Christmas anchor on purpose. It just happened. But you can also anchor something deliberately so it is there when you need it.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about for a second, anchors can happen in any of your representational systems. They can be visual, something you see. They can be auditory, something you hear, or even say to yourself in your head, or they can be something that is kinesthetic or tied to physical touch or feelings.
Yeah, so we can feel, for example, what's a good example? Maybe just the way somebody, if they put on their shoes, the way their shoes feel will anchor them to that feeling of, I want to go out for a run right now. Or I'm making that up.
Yeah,
There's all kinds of
it's a poor
anchors.
example, but we'll move on from that. The one I like is when I used to be a speaker, I used to do a lot of shows and stuff too. When I took the microphone out of the stand, I was anchored, and I would instantly dissociate and go into a very powerful onstage state, and that's where I did my best work. It became anchored, and then once I realized it was anchored, I intensified it on purpose.
And I imagine there's a feeling, there's also a visual component to you looking out at the audience, and maybe there's an auditory component. Maybe you can say something to yourself like, this is going to be awesome, or whatever it is.
Now,
so we'll get there.
We'll get there, but we can trace this back to cause. It really all started with a man, I think his first name was William, I might be wrong, but his last name was Twitmeyer. And Twitmeyer wrote about the knee-jerk reaction, whereas if a doctor was tapping the patellar reflex on the kneecap, how your knee will kick or your foot will kick, and this is a typical test that doctors will give during an examination.
And what did he discover?
He discovered that after he'd done it a few times, if he went and pretended to tap but stopped, their knee would go anyway.
Right, okay.
So Twitmeyer wrote about this, and nobody paid any attention to it. Nobody knew about it, except a Russian by the name of Ivan Pavlov. Pavlov started looking into this. He saw the power of this, and he came up with the bell that when his dog was going to eat, he'd ring the bell first. Then finally, just ringing the bell, the dog would salivate, expecting food.
So he was doing research on dogs or salivatory response in dogs, I think, and realized that if he rang the bell, when they had been conditioned, classical conditioning,
they were getting a salivary response.
They were going to be getting
Did you say
food.
salivatory?
Salivary, I think I said.
You said salivatory, but we'll let it go because it's
Did I say it wrong?
Yes, but that's fine. We'll edit that out. Now, interestingly enough, this was picked up by B.F. Skinner in his classical conditioning. Now, the difference between anchoring NLP style that we do and Skinner's classical conditioning is this. Classical conditioning requires repetition to burn it into the brain, but anchoring is done at peak state. You only have to do it once if you do a really good one. So when the person is that peak state of whatever, if you do an anchor that is replicable, distinctive, something their unconscious can notice, when you do this, it will become linked to that peak state. So if the person's really, really angry and you look at them a certain way and make a facial expression, guess what? Over time, if you do that same thing a few months later, that same expression, they'll fire off this anger without knowing why. And the example you and I have talked about is at funerals. Grief. Grief. Terrible emotion. If Chris is grief-stricken, because, you know, somebody close to him has died. During that funeral, how many people come up and say, Chris, I'm so sorry. Look in the eye and anchor it on his shoulder.
That is horrible, right?
Months later, he's got a brand new job and he comes into the office and someone says, hi, Chris, how are you? And he instantly goes, not very well.
There is this, and you know, people do this to their buddies all the time, right? That kind of thing. But with the concerned look, it's the specificity of how you're looking, and it's the
specificity makes it stand out from the background. So since you can anchor in any system, anchoring in all three is supremely powerful, and we recommend you set up your own specific awesome anchor to get in the zone. We're going to show you that now. What we recommend is anytime you notice you're in a great place in your mind, maybe you're at a comedy show or something, the comedian is hilarious. You notice that and you think, I'm going to stack this. I'm going to add this to my power of my positive anchors. What you do is feel that state, feel that joy, that happiness, whatever. If I'm second row for Black Sabbath or AC/DC, I'm in a great state. I'm going to notice it. I'm going to use my non-dominant hand, my ring finger, and my thumb. I'm going to touch them together, squeeze, look at them, and say,
we're going to say, awesome.
What that does is anchor it in three systems. I'm looking, so there's a visual aspect. I'm squeezing, there's the kinesthetic or feeling aspect, and I'm hearing myself say, awesome. Now, that will anchor it in. The key is now from now on, other than later from now on, when you are going through life and you notice you're in an amazing state. Can be any amazing state.
Yep, you can stack on top of that anchor and just build. But you can also, when you're not in an amazing state and you want to be in an amazing state, you can just fire that anchor anytime you want, right?
And how long does it last? You know, that's one of the questions we're asked. How long will it last? And Richard Bandler put it best, it will last as long as it lasts and not 1 second longer.
Yeah.
The stronger it is, the longer it'll last. Competing anchors that are negative will overwhelm it. Just keep topping it up though. Think of it as a battery. Every time you notice you're in a great state, you're laughing, you're out with friends, you're having a great time, feel it intensify. Set your anchor for about another 5 seconds. Say awesome, squeeze them together, and that will be there when you need it. Then maybe months from now, you've got to go into an important meeting and you don't feel like it, fire your awesome anchor.
Fire it, I should say, not set it.
And bang, it'll put you in the right state.
Awesome. So use anchors, they're awesome. They come from the field of Neuro Linguistic Programming. They're an amazing tool to make your life better, to control your states. So if you enjoyed this video, click that subscribe button and then click that bell icon so you'll know when we publish new videos. And check for links in the description. We'll give you some more details on this YouTube video in that description.
And that will be
awesome.
Awesome!
Talk to you next time.
Woo.